In 5th place, we have the threats of pestilence. To quote directly from Matthew 24, "And there shall be pestilences." I think I speak for all of us on Earth when I wonder if we've already started to go through with that promise. The last 3 years have been so greatly affected by plague and illness, and I'm not quite sure we will ever have a definite end, which was almost scary enough to put this higher up on my list. Thankfully, with being able to protect so many against the current illness and reopening the world, this isn't the great illness we need to fear. Biblical judgments through disease are said to be supernatural in origin. For example, when God sent boils to Egypt, they broke out instantly on humans and animals throughout the land. The pestilence of Revelation will come from one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Everything the world has gone through in the last few years was natural, not supernatural. God did not cause this virus or the panini it created. Secondly, biblical judgments are against specific sins and sinners. From Pharaoh's obstinacy to Herod's prideful idolatry, divine judgments of the past and future come to those who refuse his word and will. Throughout scripture and history, God deals with us as gently as he can or as harshly as he must. It has been preached that no specific sins cause this virus, nor are those who are afflicted with it more sinful than the rest of us. God is, quote, said to love the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions just as much as he loves the young and the healthy. I worry what could happen in the future that could be worse. Mentally, you do not want to see me cooped up again for another year. And as much as I love a good Sleepy Hollow marathon, I don't need to see a horseman of the apocalypse in person. In 4th place, we have the promises of hate. Once again from the book of Matthew, many will be offended and betray each other. Similar to my last point, I worry this prediction may already be beginning to show in today's society. With the news that comes across my feed every day, I worry for the world as we know it. According to the Bible, where there is conflict, there is the potential for hate, which leads to discord, disharmony, malice, and anger. Hate is a motivator for wicked behavior, and the Bible helps identify hate by showing how indulging in it leads to certain outcomes. Hate is not just an emotion, but a state of being that involves choices, behaviors, and thoughts. It separates people rather than bringing them together, because the one hating sets themselves away from another. Hate is intimately tied in with death, and it is said that someone harboring hate is killing their brother in their heart. When this hate is acted upon, it leads to death. Sometimes that is spiritual or relational, but unfortunately it can also be the ending of the life of another. Hate is dangerous because when taken to its logical conclusion, it is the desire to eliminate the humanity of another. I'd like to hope that we as a society can heal from the hatred in our hearts, avoiding this prediction from coming true. In 3rd place, we have the prediction of crazy earthquakes. Quoting again from, take a wild guess here. Did you guess the book of Matthew? You're brilliant! The Bible mentions earthquakes in a prophecy that Jesus gave, his words being recorded as follows. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. Jesus thus foretold that great earthquakes would occur in one place after another at a time when wars, food shortages, and pestilences would also be taking place. Together, these events identify a period in human history known as the conclusion of the system of things, or the last days. Kind of like a puzzle coming together, the 3 predictions I've listed so far tend to all come hand in hand. The National Earthquake Information Center now locates about 20,000 earthquakes around the globe each year, or approximately 55 per day. As a result of the improvements in communications and the increased interest in natural disasters, the public now learns about earthquakes more quickly than ever before. According to long-term records that date back to 1900, we expect about 16 major earthquakes in any given year. That includes 15 earthquakes in the magnitude 7 range and 1 earthquake of a magnitude, say, 8.0 or greater. In the past 40 to 50 years, our records show that we have exceeded the long-term average number of major earthquakes about a dozen times. So far, the year with the largest total was 2010, with 23 major earthquakes, the definition of which being 7.0 in magnitude or greater. And other years, the total was well below the annual long-term average of 16 major earthquakes. For example, 1988 had only 7 major earthquakes, and 1989 having 6. Knowing how much devastation a minor earthquake can cause though, never mind a large one, I'd like to not witness this prediction come to fruition. Thanks. In 2nd place, we have the second coming of Christ, otherwise known as the rapture. Many different religions have predicted this ever since it was said that Jesus ascended to heaven thousands of years ago. The Catholic Church believes at the moment of Jesus' arrival, 3 events will happen immediately. The living will pass, The universe will be transfigured, and the dead will be resurrected, judged, and recompensed. After this single instant or moment, the church does not know what will happen for the rest of eternity. Only that final and eternal judgment by God of the people in every nation will result in the glorification of some and the punishment of others. Personally, this sounds like a nightmare. A single source of instantaneous judgment deciding everyone's fate? Only a single God knowing what day and when this is going to happen? Yeah, once again, hard pass. Also, while the return of a savior may sound good in theory, I'd like to bring up another view on it. How many of y'all enjoy a zombie movie? Yeah, me too. Now, remind me, how do those start? With someone returning from the dead. I'm sure you catch my drift here. Adding on to the plague spot from earlier, just imagine what someone who passed away 2,000 years ago could bring back with them. We also have no clue if other spirits could return with Jesus. As history has shown, troublesome spirits and demonic powers have ways of getting what they want by attaching themselves to innocent beings, or posing as such to trick us. Once again, as much as I love discussing demonic powers that have made their way to Earth, I highly disapprove of anything that could attract them here. I'm begging you here, for the love of all things in the world, leave the gosh dang Ouija board on the shelf at the store. Please. Finally, we have my personal favorite, the Antichrist. Remember a minute ago when I talked about things that could take Jesus' place by posing as him? Yeah, time to elaborate on that front. The technical definition of the Antichrist refers to people prophesied by the Bible to oppose Jesus and substitute themselves in Christ's place before the second coming. The term Antichrist is found 4 times in the New Testament, solely in the first and second epistle of John. The Antichrist is announced as the one who denies the Father and Son. Now look, I don't really believe in a singular male god myself, which I'm sure total shocker to all of y'all, but I don't think that alone would make me or anyone else with similar beliefs the Antichrist. So I'll elaborate more if you don't click off right now. Yes, pay attention. The Antichrist would be the polar opposite and ultimate enemy of Christ. According to Christian tradition, he will reign terribly in the period prior to the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment being the day that Jesus returns to either save or, condemn us, depending on where you fall under his and God's mortal compass. The term Antichrist first appeared in the letters of John. I know, not Matthew's for once. And the fully developed story of the Antichrist's life and reign is found in medieval texts. The revelation to John refers to this figure as the beast from the abyss and the beast from the sea. In the most sustained account of his appearance, he is called the man of sin and son of perdition. He will come at a time of a general apostasy, lack of faith, deceive people with signs and wonders, sit in the temple of God, and claim to be God himself. Finally, he will be defeated by Jesus, who will destroy him by the spirit of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. I guess I'll make a note to keep a pair of sunglasses in my purse from here on out. In terms of direct comparison, with Jesus being born of a virgin by means of immaculate conception by the Holy Spirit, the Antichrist will be born of a lady of the night by means of conception by a diabolical spirit. Although opinions differed as to whether the Antichrist's father will be a man or demon, in either case the Antichrist will be, as commonly noted in the Middle Ages, full of the devil from the time of his conception. He will be born of the tribe of Dan, known as the viper in the road, rather than the tribe of Judah, and in Babylon, not Bethlehem. Like Christ, the Antichrist will grow up in obscurity and begin his open ministry when he reaches the age of 30, gaining followers by giving signs and performing miracles. The signs and miracles once more would be polar opposites of Christ, because, well, the Antichrist's supposed miracles will only be tricks, with his triumphant reign lasting for around 3.5 years. Like Christ, the Antichrist will make his way to Jerusalem, but unlike Jesus, he will be enthusiastically hailed and revered. During his reign, he will rebuild the temple and sit on the throne of Solomon while he converts the rulers of the earth to his cause. All who resist him will be tortured, and there will be great suffering to an extreme that has not been experienced since the beginning of time. The prophets Enoch and Elijah, who never died but were spirited away to heaven, will arrive to preach against the tyrant, but the Antichrist will slay them. At the end of this allotted 3.5 years, however, the Antichrist will be destroyed by the power of Christ, and after a short amount of time will come the Last Judgment and the end of the world. Not to sound like a broken record, but once again, yikes! I'd rather not have that battle or have this world end. Sure, it's not perfect by any means, and while I could stand here for about an hour and list off a long list of things I'd really love to see improve, I don't want to face an all-out battle.
Number 5. A dangerous bioweapon. In 1925, the Geneva Convention decided to ban the use of biological weapons in war, with all the countries making a promise to never, under any circumstances, develop, produce, stockpile, or otherwise acquire or retain microbial or other biological agents or toxins, whatever their origin or method of production, of types and in quantities that have no justification for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful purposes. They also agreed not to develop weapons, equipment, or means of delivery designed to use such agents or toxins for hostile purposes or in armed combat. For the most part, the countries of the world have stuck to this agreement, other than some outliers such as the Soviet Union and Iraq. Unfortunately, one of Baba Vanga's predictions for 2023 says that a large country will begin testing a new bioweapon. She is sparse on the details, but if this is true, which of the large nations will be carrying out the test? Will it be Russia, the United States, China? Who? And what is the nature of this bioweapon? Does it contain lab-grown viruses that could wreak havoc on humanity? Or some other deadly mutagen that could permanently alter the DNA of its victims? Although she has had a few predictions that came true, Baba Vanga also said that World War III would begin in 2010, and that by 2016, Europe would become an empty wasteland. So, hopefully, this is one of the predictions that turns out not to be true, as the idea of chemical weapons being unleashed this year is simply too much for me to deal with, on top of everything else going on. Number 4. A solar storm. With all the rather dire predictions made by Baba Vanga, it could be tempting to call her a pessimist. One of her more devastating predictions for the year ahead is that we will experience what is known as a solar storm. A solar storm refers to phenomena taking place on the surface of the sun, such as coronal mass ejections or solar flares. If one of these coronal mass ejections were to reach Earth, it would cause a geomagnetic storm that would have horrible consequences for our technology-reliant world. This kind of storm has happened before on Earth in 1859, in what has since been called the Carrington Event. Due to the work of astronomer Richard Carrington, it resulted in telegraph networks being knocked out, as well as people who were operating the telegraph machines being electrocuted, and even some pretty nasty fires. But it would be much worse if it happened today. Imagine, if you will, a world where all of the technology that you take for granted was suddenly fried and unusable. Suddenly, internet access and records would be lost. Communication systems that we have come to rely on to keep our world running would become useless blocks of dead machinery. A world of darkness where chaos reigns and the financial markets are suddenly put into a dramatic tailspin that we could not even begin to reverse the effects of for years. Think of the chaos that took place relatively recently in Texas when the power grid went down, and imagine what would happen if that took place all over the world. The effect of this happening now could be no less than the total collapse of modern society. This is one of the most plausible predictions made by Baba Vanga, as some scientists say that since this kind of solar activity has happened before, we are overdue for it to happen again, and that it is not a matter of if, but rather a matter of when it happens. Considering the disastrous global consequences of one of these severe solar storms, let us hope that Baba Vanga is incorrect in her prediction that this will happen in 2023. Number 3. A series of viruses. Considering how ill-prepared we turned out to be for the last super virus that ravaged the world, the idea of more viruses in the future is somehow equal parts terrifying and exhausting. Baba Vanga actually predicts a few different viruses will come to light, but the soonest will not affect humans, though it is still disturbing. According to Baba Vanga, in 2023, birds will be subjected to a deadly virus that will transmit through both the air and contaminated water. It will spread incredibly fast, wiping out entire flocks in weeks and leaving many species of bird on the brink of extinction. Scientists will apparently scramble to try and find a cure for our avian friends, but the now common sight of a flock of birds flying through the air will become a distant memory. This doesn't directly affect humans, but considering how much chicken we as a species eat, this will be a tough loss if it comes to pass. Although that is the only virus predicted for this year, Baba Vanga has predicted that there will be a series of viruses over the coming decades, each one more serious than the last. The next virus Baba Vanga predicts will apparently take hold in 2088 and will be unlike anything we've ever seen. It won't cause humans to have trouble breathing or for their immune systems to be compromised, but will apparently cause people to age extremely rapidly, resulting in a young person in their 20s looking like a senior citizen within a few seconds. This virus will apparently be an issue for humanity for almost 10 years, when it is apparently exterminated in 2097. We will then apparently get a break from pandemics until the year 2256, when a rocket sent to explore the deepest parts of the cosmos will return to Earth carrying an intergalactic virus. Hopefully this virus won't be too intense, as a universal cure for all diseases isn't predicted until the year 4304, though by then Baba Vanga says that humans will no longer live on Earth, but on Mars. So, make of that what you will. Number 2, a change in the Earth's orbit. There's a lot of wonderful things to like about the planet Earth. Lush fields, flowing waters, and its orbit exactly where it should be, which is quite an underrated but fantastic trait of the big blue marble we call home. Baba Vanga made another worrying prediction about the state of the Earth for 2023. She predicted that somehow, something is going to knock Earth off of its orbit forever. The Earth's orbit has been altered before, but in this prediction, the alteration is going to be much more significant, causing much more widespread effects. Now, it should go without saying that something knocking Earth off of its orbit would be very bad. If Earth somehow was thrown off its orbit by some terrible force, it would wreak incalculable havoc. Countries would be thrown into cycles of days and nights that would not last for hours, but months at a time. Think of the damage that would cause. Unending daylight would lead to mass sleep deprivation, global anxiety, as well as incalculable damage to our flora and fauna and wildlife. Crops would be ravaged and burnt, leading to a global famine. Unending days would lead to temperatures doubling, melting the ice caps at an even faster rate than they already are. This would result in massively rising sea levels and the flooding of coastal cities. Unending night wouldn't be much better, as it would make things very cold, and plant life would have no way to achieve the necessary photosynthesis, resulting in crop failures and once again, countless deaths. Interestingly, this is a recognized phenomenon called a polar night, and there's a town in Norway that experiences something like this. In Tromsø, the sun doesn't rise from November to January. While this is fine for a Norwegian town, a polar night taking place in important farmland regions that are responsible for feeding massive portions of the population is a recipe for disaster, and that's not even mentioning how much easier that would make it for vampires to attack us. Number 1, an alien invasion. One of Baba Vanga's most surprising predictions for 2023 is that this is the year we will make contact with visitors from another world. Unfortunately for us, these visitors will apparently not be coming in peace. She says that aliens will attack the Earth, and that during their invasion, they will use technology in order to prevent us from using electricity for 3 days and 3 nights, and the Earth will be plunged into total darkness, with neither the moon or stars being visible. We've already gone over how reliant we are on technology in the solar storm entry, so imagine how difficult it would be for us to be suddenly thrown back to the Stone Age, and then have to try and fight an alien race who have extremely advanced technology, as well as a desire to kill us. Baba Vanga claims that this will not be the end of the species as a whole, and that 10,000 of us will survive. But considering that we currently have a planet-wide population of 7.8 billion people, 10,000 survivors indicates only a 1.28% survival rate, meaning that for all practical purposes, it would be the end of the world as we know it. Baba Vanga has predictions for humanity beyond this point, and some of them are truly incredible. They include things like the discovery of time travel, the colonization of other planets, underwater cities, and an eventual peace being made with the extraterrestrials. But considering that if her predictions come true, there's only a 1.28% chance that any of this will be relevant to you, there really is no need for me to get into those right now.
Number 5, Stonecutters and the Secret Order. Season 6 is up there as one of the best seasons of The Simpsons overall. Like, it was just banger after banger. Tons of classic episodes. You got the Who Shot Mr. Burns plotline, some of the best in the series. There's a bunch of season 6 episodes on this list, just to show how seminal it was. One of the more memorable ones is Homer the Great, where a downtrodden Homer feels he has no place in the world or higher meaning until he finds himself involved in a gentleman's club called the Stonecutters, a secret centuries-old order Homer finds himself at the center of when he is revealed to be the prophesized chosen one of the group. Now, as it turns out, the Stonecutters are far more than just a place for the guys to play dominoes and kick back. They're also a powerful clandestine lobby group pulling the strings behind the scenes. They're behind everything. They're rigging the Oscars, they bury the electric car, they keep Martians under wrap, and they find consistent work for 80s icon Steve Guttenberg. The Stonecutters are a fairly obvious stand-in for various conspiracy theories like the Freemasons or the Illuminati, and if you believe the conspiracies, and I bet you do because you're watching these videos, allegedly they run the world behind the scenes. It's always rumored and long thought that they're controlling everything from the shadows. Could the Simpsons writers be letting the public know the truth of these sinister dealings? How these organizations work? Could Homer's secret monkey society be pulling the strings? Now, of course, if I was in a secret cabal that had made the world into my puppets, one of the first things I would do is discredit all the theories about my organization by, putting them in episodes of a beloved animated comedy show, making it seem like you'd have to be nuts to believe in that sort of thing. But that's just what I would do if I was part of a secret order controlling things. And if you're looking for more conspiracies, theories about beloved shows from your childhood, we have got plenty of that. Click through Top 5 Scary and I'm sure you'll find something worth shrieking at. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but most importantly, keep watching this video right now because we got way more weird Simpsons predictions coming up for you right after this. Number 4, super realistic holograms. The Simpsons has been going on for so long that their episodes that were once in the past are now set in the future. Iconic Lisa's wedding episode, by the way, another season 6 episode. That episode's future flash forward took place in 2010. Very funny to think about that now when they say Homer was a child, he was a child in the 90s. I'm not ready for him to age up for a few years to be a 2000s kid. Anyway, it's just funny seeing what they thought the future was going to look like and how we keep surpassing those things, and we'll see where it goes from there. Eventually, the Simpsons started doing a little mini story arc of sorts with their future flash forward episodes, and one of them is in the episode Holidays of Future Past from the series' 23rd season. So I could probably say anything happened in this episode. I doubt anybody's still watching then. I'm getting off topic here. Bart is down on his luck, and as one could probably expect, he's still living under the thumb of Principal Skinner, who's now Landlord Skinner at the Springfield Elementary Loft. Classrooms getting converted into apartments is depressing, but not really the scary prediction we're going for here. It's when Bart's watching Itchy and Scratchy. Instead of it being an animated show, it is now a 3D hologram that seems like it physically exists within the environment. It's a tangible thing. It's even splattering all over the walls behind on what used to be the chalkboard Bart was writing on every day. Now, holograms are already getting pretty out there in terms of technological advancements. Our man Homer himself was even a hologram, joining his father Matt Groening up on stage at Comic-Con one year. And I think it's possible that in the eventual dark future, we'll have holograms that exist as real physical objects you can touch, interact with, and I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see hologram TV shows. Hologram The Simpsons would be a lot of fun. Hologram South Park, I don't know if I'd let that into my home. I'm not 100% confident about that. I do suspect though, if there was holograms that you could touch and interact with, we would never see anybody going outside again, ever, if that happens. Number 3, mind controlling in music. In season 12, all the way back in 2001, crazy how those episodes now seem like the really old ones. We got an episode called New Kids on the Block, which saw Bart and his friends Milhouse and Ralph and his sometimes friend, sometimes bully Nelson getting recruited to become the hottest boy band in Springfield. I don't know why, this one was always one of my favorites as a youngster. I think I just liked them singing. In the episode, a producer named LT Smash catches wind of one of Bart's pranks and is instantly enamored with his antics and signs him up to be the new face of his boy band party posse. Doesn't matter that the kids can't sing, they're all auto-tuned using NASA voice-changing technology. The boys end up having a smash hit single, a patriotic anthem called Drop da Bomb, a catchy song about how awesome the US forces are. But it's his chorus that really sticks out. They got these little belly dancers singing Ivan et Niage, and it gets stuck in your head easily, but it's a covert message. It's just join the nation. Navy backwards, and that's still like stuck in my head all to this day. So even as joke propaganda, that's really wormed its way into my brain. It turns out that LT Smash was never a record producer. He's Lieutenant Smash, and the whole boy band is just a convoluted scheme to get people to subconsciously want to join the Navy. I'm pretty sure the Village People did a similar thing, and with the YMCA. The idea of music being used as a secretive tool to sway the public secretly has been a very popular conspiracy theory for years, with some believing, rap and hip-hop are Illuminati puppets for mind control or world domination. I know it would certainly explain how much Lil Nas X's music gets stuck in my head. Industry baby, industry plant, maybe. By the Stonecutters even. This sort of thing really isn't that far off, to be honest, from all the wild predictions on this list so far. Using media to sway public opinion for propaganda is way more commonplace than I think any of us really realize. I mean, just last year, the film Top Gun Maverick, hugely popular movie, everybody saw it, contained this very subliminal message throughout the script where every time you saw a fighter jet flying around with sweet 80s music, you thought, wow, flying a plane would be so cool. I should fly a plane for the US Air Force. It's just crazy how subliminal they do that sort of stuff. Number 2, sentient robots. Besides The Simpsons, one of my all-time favorite TV shows is HBO's Westworld. Well, at least the first 2 seasons. I don't really want to talk about what happened to Westworld. Deserve better. Isn't it sad when a great show lives past its prime and it seems like the original magic is long gone, but the characters keep moving forward, tired like zombies? Anyway, speaking of The Simpsons, in another season 6 classic episode, I told ya, Itchy and Scratchy Land, Lisa and Bart egg the family to take them to Itchy and Scratchy Land, a Disney World parody with state-of-the-art animatronics of the most beloved violent cat and mouse duo. Bart and Homer end up getting themselves involved in all sorts of trouble, tormenting the mascots and wreaking havoc around the park, and it's not long before this Disney World parody shifts to a Westworld parody. The movie. The show wasn't out just yet. The robots go haywire, attacking everybody, no longer able to distinguish friend from foe. Funny enough, this isn't even the only Westworld parody on the show. Very recently, the last Treehouse of Horror was a parody of the HBO show, revealing that the entire show was actually the product of a highly immersive amusement park. Now, we're not quite there yet. Sadly, we're not quite at the level of technology where you can go to a theme park staffed by interactable robots. I know this because if there was, I would never spend a second anywhere but there. But we are really getting there. In 2020, South Korea saw the opening of the Jeongnam Masan Robot Land, the world's first totally robot-themed amusement park. Now, the robots at this amusement park, they look pretty cute, all things considered, because I guess, you're not gonna scare them right away. But that's because they're luring you into a false sense of security. All it takes is one robot snapping after having the last bit of ice cream smeared across its lens and rising up against its human overlords, and we get a full-scale rebellion on our hands, and The Simpsons called it first. I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords. And a quick aside, if they ever made a cowboy robot amusement park, I would actually be so nice to the cowboy robots, and I would never do anything bad to them, ever. Number 1, zombies. You would be surprised how often in the futuristic Simpsons episodes that it's suggested that zombies are going to be a serious problem at some point. I didn't know how many modern episodes of The Simpsons have these flash forward timelines. I haven't seen anything past season 12 really, but it's enough that it's starting to make me just a little bit suspicious. This comes up genuinely more than you think it would. Clearly, someone in the writer's room at The Simpsons had a pretty firm belief that this is how society's going to end. Now, it could just be because The Walking Dead is very popular, and we as a people love zombies in our pop culture, guilty as charged. But really, it just shows up enough that I felt like I had to bring it up. In 2 separate episodes showing possible visions of The Simpsons' future, we're told there's a low-level zombie apocalypse going on. I wouldn't give this too much weight normally, but The Simpsons has been right about enough stuff that I think, it's just something we should consider, at least something to hear out. The ending of Homer Goes to Prep School, after Homer sees that society would end up surviving a total collapse, the episode ends with a shot of a meteor with zombies coming to Springfield. And this seems like this might be a little offhanded joke, but it might be canon because then in the episode, Days of Future, again in the future timeline, zombies are part of society, with Lisa working at a charity looking after the undead. Is this a possible glimpse into a dark future? I kind of think that the way they react in The Simpsons is more accurate to how we do with zombies. I don't think we'd have have a full-blown Last of Us thing, maybe for a couple weeks, but I feel like we just work around it. I think you'd see zombies working as like Uber Eats couriers or just like hanging out on the street and, you know, someone would like tug on them on a leash and stuff. Besides, I'm not that afraid of seeing a shell of someone's former self shambling around as a corpse. I've seen modern episodes of The Simpsons. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm being too mean to end the video with. I hope The Simpsons never ends. I hope they keep it on forever, if for nothing else, so that we can always look back to what they got right and what they're about to predict. Number 5, war. What is it good for? 7 months the Great War, people dead of evil doing. Ruin ever shall not fall to the king. Now, if you've watched any of our previous videos on Nostradamus and other end-of-the-world prediction-style videos, you know that Nostradamus and the other seers tended to keep their predictions pretty vague, but sometimes they spelled it out simple enough that even a simpleton like me can follow along. Nostradamus is predicting a big war, a great war even, in size, not in quality. I don't think there was ever a great war. If the quatrain is anything to go off of, Nostradamus predicts that the war will erupt across Europe and then ravage the countryside, while hopefully keeping the city of Rouen, France in a good spot, and will refuse to fall to the king. Now that part is open to a little bit of interpretation, because really that could mean anything. Who could the king be referring to? Is it one particular world leader? One nation vying for power? Is it the Burger King mascot who's finally snapped and is on a warpath of world domination? He's easily the most unhinged and dangerous of all fast food mascots, and the one I would most expect to start a war. Now, this is obviously a delicate subject, but the current situations across Eastern Europe is already cause for enough alarm. A war that's got everybody on their toes and watching the news constantly. And I don't think anyone wants to see it develop further into a proverbial Great War. A 7-month Great War sounds like it'd be over in a flash, but I think the last thing anyone wants is a war that's over in a flash, knowing the nuclear-powered arsenals out there. Shorter war is not necessarily a good thing. Nuclear annihilation is kind of the last thing anybody needs out there. Hey, hope I'm not bumming you out too much, talking about global conflicts and possibly the end of the world. Let's talk about something fun, like our fun channel. We got all sorts of scary content of just about any topic you can think of. So click through, stay scared, but stay watching this video, because we got a whole lot more predictions left to go. Number 4, Mars and Elon Musk. Listen to this quatrain. The two contenders will unite together. When most others unite with Mars, the African leader is fearful and trembles. The dual alliance is separated by the fleet. This one seems too perfect, you know? Immediately as I read that quatrain, maybe you made the same connection too. Mars, African leader? Immediately coming to my mind is Elon Musk, the South African billionaire tycoon who currently owns Twitter and has been extremely outspoken about his desire to flee this planet and to become the king and colonize the red planet of Mars. But who are these two contenders that have to unite together? Could it be referring to global superpowers coming together for the future of humanity? Or is it Facebook and Twitter coming together and he's just looking to buy more social medias? Some professional followers of Nostradamus' work, such as Lori Reading, has argued in favor of this as well, arguing that this is referring to the billionaire's plans for galactic domination. Another quatrain seems almost connected with this line from another verse. Take a listen. The light of Mars shall go out. Could this be again a reference to the mission? A suggestion that perhaps this dream of Mars is just that, a foolish dream, and that a colony on Mars would fail in upon itself. It also links up bizarrely well with the Opportunity rover. If you remember that from a few years back, the little guy who was rolling around the surface of Mars, its last transmission was, "My battery is fading and I'm going dark," which is almost like directly saying a light of Mars is going out. This is actually starting to creep me out here. Nostradamus might have been magic just a little bit. Time will tell, obviously, if this one remains to be true, although after Twitter, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I don't know if I want to pay $8 a month to subscribe to Mars Blue for a checkmark. Number 3, more plague. Oh, that's the last thing any of us need. Well, take a listen to this doom prophecy. Near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the likes of which has never seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. Well, This doesn't sound fun at all. I'm not sure anybody wants this. I'm pretty sure everyone watching this has experienced more than enough plagues to last us a lifetime. Of course, it's unfortunately kind of foolhardy to think that humanity will never experience another viral epidemic because, well, germs are always going to exist unless we eradicate them entirely. So all we can do is brace ourselves for the next one and hopefully learn from the past. I mean, that's why we're looking all the way back to an old French astronomer who was writing things in the 15th century, and the off chance that any of it might help us out. Well, he might be on the money with this one again, because recently in 2021, researchers in Siberia uncovered in a block of ice 33 strains of ancient novel viruses. Now, novel means that they haven't been discovered before, not that they're just kind of fun and no trivia. Personally, I would put them back in the iceberg, I think, and then I would put like a tarp or maybe some tape over it. I think we should just deal with that where it is, and we should not be bringing any ancient prehistoric viruses into today's times. I think I'm good. Now, what really concerns me about this quatrain is the picture that it paints. Near the gates and within 2 cities, the people will be put out by steel, crying to the great immortal god for relief. Oh, that's dramatic. Could this be a reference to some power taking out its own citizens? Armies firing at infected individuals? Now, it could be that, but it could also be possible that Nostradamus somehow had a powerful vision into the future, and he was just watching an episode of The Last of Us, and he was basing his predictions around that. Good on him for not spoiling that series for 500 years. Number 2, economic crisis. Take a listen to this. No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred to eat his fellow man in despair. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm a YouTuber, sort of. But I don't need to be an economist to tell you that things have been getting pretty expensive and everyone's feeling their purse strings tighten up. I can't tell you how many times this week I've had pasta with no sauce for dinner. Admittedly, I don't buy a ton of honey or candle wax, so I can't really comment on how accurate that all is, but I can definitely tell you that my weekly groceries are getting a lot more expensive. The fear, of course, here is that I think eating your fellow man in despair really does not sound like the good option. Now, there are a couple different ways we could take this interpretation. We could take it very literally, suggesting that things are going to get so dire and so bad that we'll have so little food to go around that we're forced to consume one another to survive, which really doesn't sound pleasant. And while I'm talking, I'd just like to throw out here, I am way too stringy to be valuable as meat. I mean, look at me, I'm like a bird, I'm hollow, so I wouldn't make a good meal out of me at all, so don't even bother trying over here. Alternatively, it could be interpreted in a more esoteric way. And since he's an old astronomer, I'm sure he spoke esoterically most of the time. He could be referring to the idea of eating the rich. If people get so fed up with the costs of living on just about everything and decide to revolt and strike back at the people in charge, hoping to dismantle the systems in place, which, hey, funny enough, actually leads into a segue for my next point really well. It's almost like I set that up. Number 1, great discord. Take a listen. The trumpet shakes with great discord, an agreement broken, lifting the face to heaven. The bloody mouth will swim with blood, the face anointed with milk and honey lies on the ground. Like most of Nostradamus' writings, this one does sound a bit like it's the opening monologue to one of the Lord of the Rings movies, and wow, honey again. Honey was like a really serious cause of concern for this guy. I think he might not have been an astronomer. He might just have been a man who took his morning tea incredibly seriously. So besides crying over spilled milk and honey, what do our great Nostradamus experts have to say about this one? Was Nostradamus banned from his Discord server and writing against the tyrannical mods? Well, like all of the ones on this list, this unnerving prediction seems to suggest that dire violence will come to plague us, with unrest between the masses and classes leading to full-scale rebellion and riots. This little ditty seems to support that, with Nostradamus writing that sooner and later you will see great changes made, dreadful horrors and vengeances. Well, I support great changes, definitely. I'm a huge fan of great changes, but I am not so sure about dreadful horrors and vengeances. I feel like I've seen more than enough of those. The last few years have seen more civil unrest than ever. Like, this is the most upset I've seen people in my life, at least. With it seeming like that somewhere around the world there's a mass scale protest or riot every couple of weeks. You know, it's easy to flick on the news and you see that and wonder if eventually we're gonna hit a boiling point and we'll see some of those horrifying horrors and vengeances and all those mal thoughts that he was thinking up. And when it does, if we'll see some serious changes, or hey, at the very least, maybe some positive progress towards the price of honey, because apparently that's the most important cause in the world.
Number 5. Oh great, more viruses. Considering how ill-prepared we turned out to be for the last super virus that ravaged the world, the idea of more viruses in the future is somehow equal parts terrifying and exhausting. Baba Vanga actually predicts a few different viruses will come to light, but the soonest will not affect humans, though it is still disturbing. According to Baba, in 2023, birds will be subjected to a deadly virus that will transmit through both the air and contaminated water. It will spread incredibly fast, wiping out entire flocks in weeks and leaving many species of bird on the brink of extinction. Scientists will apparently scramble to try and find a cure for our avian friends, but the now common sight of a flock of birds flying through the air will become a distant memory. This doesn't directly affect humans, but considering how much chicken we as a species eat, this will be a tough loss if it comes to pass. The next virus Baba Vanga predicts will apparently take hold in 2088 and will be unlike anything we've ever seen. It won't cause humans to have trouble breathing or for their immune systems to be compromised, but will apparently cause people to age extremely rapidly, resulting in a young person in their 20s looking like a senior citizen within a few seconds. This virus will apparently be an issue for humanity for almost 10 years, when it is apparently exterminated in 2097. We will then apparently get a break from pandemics until the year 2256, when a rocket sent to explore the deepest parts of the cosmos will return to Earth carrying an intergalactic virus. Hopefully, this virus won't be too intense, as a universal cure for all diseases isn't predicted until the year 4304. Though by then, Baba Vanga says that humans will no longer live on Earth, but on Mars, so make of that what you will. Number 4. A dangerous bioweapon. In 1925, the Geneva Convention decided to ban the use of biological weapons in war, with all the countries making a promise to never, under any circumstances, develop, produce, stockpile, or otherwise acquire or retain microbial or other biological agents or toxins, whatever their origin or method of production, of types and in quantities that have no justification for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful purposes. They also agreed not to develop weapons, equipment, or means of delivery designed to use such agents or toxins for hostile purposes, or in armed combat. For the most part, the countries of the world have stuck to this agreement, other than some outliers such as the Soviet Union and Iraq. Unfortunately, one of Baba Vanga's other predictions for 2023 says that a large country will begin testing a new bioweapon. She is sparse on the details, but if this is true, which of the large nations will be carrying out the test? Will it be Russia, the United States, China? Who? And what is the nature of this bioweapon? Does it contain lab-grown viruses that could wreak havoc on humanity, or some other deadly mutagen that could permanently alter the DNA of its victims? Although she has had a few predictions that came true, Baba Vanga also said that World War III would begin in 2010, and that by 2016, Europe would become an empty wasteland. So hopefully, this is one of the predictions that turns out to not be true, as the idea of chemical weapons being unleashed this year is simply too much for me to deal with on top of everything else going on. Number 3. A change in the Earth's orbit. There's a lot of wonderful things to like about the planet Earth. Lush fields, flowing water, and its orbit exactly where it should be, which is quite an underrated but fantastic trait of the big blue marble we call home. Baba Vanga made another worrying prediction about the state of the Earth for 2023. She predicted that somehow something is going to knock Earth off of its orbit forever. Now, it should go without saying that something knocking Earth off of its orbit would be very bad. If Earth somehow was thrown off its orbit by some terrible force, it would wreak incalculable havoc. Countries would be thrown into cycles of days and nights that would last not for hours, but for months at a time. Think of the damage that would be caused. Unending daylight would lead to mass sleep deprivation, global anxiety, as well as incalculable damage to our flora, fauna, and wildlife. Crops would be ravaged and burnt, leading to a global famine. Unending days would lead to temperatures doubling, melting the ice caps at an even faster rate than they already are. This would result in massively rising sea levels and the flooding of coastal cities. Unending night wouldn't be much better, as it would make things very cold, and plant life would have no way to achieve the necessary photosynthesis, resulting in crop failures and once again, countless deaths. Interestingly, this is a recognized phenomenon called a polar night, and there's a town in Norway that experiences something like this. In Tromsø, the sun doesn't rise from November to January. While this is fine for a Norwegian town, a polar night taking place in the bread bowl is a recipe for disaster, and that's not even mentioning how much easier that would make it for vampires to attack us. Number 2, a solar storm. With all of the rather dire predictions made by Baba Vanga, it could be tempting to call her a pessimist. One of her more devastating predictions for the year ahead is that we will experience what is known as a solar storm. A solar storm refers to phenomena taking place on the surface of the sun, such as coronal mass ejections or solar flares. If one of these coronal mass ejections were to reach Earth, it would cause a geomagnetic storm that would have horrible consequences for our technology-reliant world. This kind of storm has happened before on Earth in 1859 in what has since been called the Carrington event, due to the work of astronomer Richard Carrington. It resulted in telegraph networks being knocked out, as well as people using electronics being electrocuted, and even some pretty nasty fires. But it would be much worse if it happened today. Imagine, if you will, a world where all of the technology you take for granted was suddenly fried and unusable. Suddenly, internet access and records would be lost. Communication systems that we have come to rely on to keep our world running would become useless blocks of dead machinery. A world of darkness where chaos reigns and the financial markets are suddenly put into a dramatic tailspin that we could not even begin to reverse the effects of for years. Think of the chaos that took place relatively recently in Texas when the power grid went down, and imagine what would happen if that took place all over the world. The effect of this happening now could be no less than the total collapse of modern society. This is one of the most plausible predictions made by Baba Vanga, as some scientists say that since this kind of solar activity has happened before, we are overdue for it to happen again, and that is a matter not of if, but rather of when it happens. Considering the disastrous global consequences of one of these severe solar storms, let us hope that Baba Vanga is incorrect in her prediction that this will happen in 2023. Number 1, an alien invasion. One of Baba Vanga's most surprising predictions for 2023 is that this is the year we will make contact with visitors from another world. Unfortunately for us, these visitors will apparently not be coming in peace. She says that aliens will attack the Earth, and that during their invasion, they will use technology in order to prevent us from using electricity for 3 days and 3 nights, and that the Earth will be plunged into total darkness, with neither the moon or the stars being visible. We've already gone over how reliant we are on technology in the previous entry, so imagine how difficult it would be for us to suddenly be thrown back to the Stone Age, and then have to try and fight an alien race who have extremely advanced technology, as well as a desire to kill us. Baba Vanga claims that this will not be the end of the species as a whole, and that 10,000 of us will survive. But considering that we currently have a planet-wide population of 7.8 billion people, 10,000 survivors indicates only a 1.28% survival rate, meaning that for all practical purposes, it would be the end of the world as we know it. Apparently, peace with extraterrestrials is something we will eventually achieve, as Baba Vanga predicts that in the year 2130, aliens will be helping us to construct underwater cities, which will manage to become autonomous by producing their own power and food by 2195. These underwater cities are even more impressive when you consider that Baba Vanga also predicts that the Earth will become dry and desertified by 2170. Baba Vanga also predicts that in the year 2288, humanity will discover time travel, and that this is when aliens and humans will make contact. Which is interesting, as she already said that the first contact in war with the aliens would happen 265 years prior. And if this is first contact, who are the aliens helping us build the underwater cities on the dry desert planet planet of Earth 158 years earlier in 2130. Do all these contradictions have anything to do with the time travel we will discover? Truly, Baba Vanga gets more and more mysterious as time goes by.
Number 5. A bioweapon disaster. Baba Vanga has been called the Nostradamus of the Balkans, and if you're a fan of this channel, presumably you've heard a lot about Baba Vanga. When she was a girl, a sandstorm blinded her. However, when a door closes, God opens a window, and although she lost her sight, she was given a second sight, an ability to allegedly see into the future. And over the years, she's made quite a name for herself, making several predictions. Now, any old hat can predict stuff, but it takes a real prophet to land the nail on the head. One of Baba Vanga's more concerning predictions, to say the least, is that in the near immediate future, there's going to be a bioweapon disaster carried out by a large nation. Now, of course, in classic Baba Vanga tradition, she was just cryptic enough to not mention which country's doing this. As well, it's hard to say what exactly she meant by a bioweapon, but that's why we love you, Baba Vanga. We love vague mysticisms over here. Some sort of gas weapon or a virus? Now, the United Nations, of course, bans the development and production of any biological weapons, but, you know, if you think all the countries follow everything the United Nations does all the time, I've got a bridge I'd love to sell you. Anyway, if she was predicting accurately, this would have huge ramifications, not just for public safety, but also global politics. If it was a virus she's referring to, Vanga did make another prediction similarly in 2022 that a new virus would be uncovered and spread rapidly across the globe, as if we really need to do that one again. We just recently uncovered 33 new viruses in Siberia, and if you can wait just a couple minutes, you'll hear a lot more about that. Now, could there possibly be a connection between these retroviruses and her prediction of a bioweapon? I mean, of course there could be, but there could also not be. For all of our sakes, we sincerely hope maybe Baba Vanga was getting this one wrong. She's not right all the time. She predicted by 2017 that Europe would cease to exist, and as of this video, December 30th, 2022, Europe currently still exists. Can we get someone to check in on that just to make 100% sure? She also predicted that Barack Obama, the 44th president, would be the final president the United States ever saw. And unless she was making a complicated political commentary, there have been 2 more presidents since then, and there probably will be a few more afterwards. So she's not always right. But if you want a prediction that is right on the money 100% of the time, I predict that if you click through on Top 5 Scary, you're gonna find a video you like, you'll subscribe, and you'll get fresh scary content every single day. And I've got a feeling that I'm right.
I know that psychics are fake because one told me I'd find love. Number 4, yet another supervirus. Athos Salome is a self-proclaimed parapsychologist and psychic who has been called the Nostradamus of Brazil. Seems like every country has one. And every year, he makes a point of releasing his predictions for the year ahead. Whether his predictions are simply guesses, or if he really does have some kind of psychic gift, is really not for me to say. But what I will say is that he has a relatively impressive track record. Salome was apparently able to predict a variety of things that happened in the last few years, such as the virus that has been taking the world by storm, the current situation in the Ukraine, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and the results of the recent World Cup in Qatar. If this is true, and Athos really has been capable of predicting major world events, I really hope his predictions for the year ahead prove untrue. In his 2023 prediction report, he states that the world will have to deal with yet another bug that could cause serious harm to the population. As he puts it, it will sweep the world, and the fight against this new virus will take longer than one can imagine. If this new virus goes unchecked, suffering, mental and material damage will proliferate death, and this virus will be known as the greatest Grim Reaper in history. Athos claims that the origin of this sickness will be a result of melting ice in Antarctica. Whether his prediction for this year is true or not, this particular theory does have some scientific plausibility. Scientists have been saying for years that as the polar ice caps melt, viruses and bacteria that have been frozen in the ice for thousands of years could be released onto the world. We got a taste of this in 2016 when 8 people in Siberia were infected with anthrax after an infected reindeer carcass that had been frozen in the permafrost was thawed out due to a heat wave. Scientists have studied ice samples taken from the Tibetan Plateau and apparently discovered 33 previously unknown viruses that have been frozen away for about 15,000 years. Hopefully, Athos is mistaken, and this won't be the year where a previously unknown virus thaws out from the ice and drives the world into pandemonium once again.
Number 3, leave that in the video, please. Please. And number 3, a shift in Earth's orbit. You know, there's a lot of really good things to like about the Earth. Lush fields, flowing water, the Fast and Furious franchise, and it orbits exactly where it should. It's a fantastic trait of our big blue marble. Well, Baba Vanga, always in my mind and always in my heart, made another worrying prediction about the state of the Earth in the near future, where she predicted that somehow, someway, something is going to knock Earth off of its orbit. Now, I feel like I don't need to explain too much why something knocking Earth off of its orbit would be pretty bad, mostly because I'm not a scientist, I don't really know the big details. Everything we're doing on this planet works the way it does, due in no small part to everything fitting in just the right place. But let's get into it for just a second. If Earth was somehow thrown off by its orbit by some incomprehensible cosmic Galactus level force, it would wreak incalculable havoc. Countries would be thrown into cycles of month-long days or nights, which might sound nice at first, imagine you had the most beautiful day of the year lasting 3 months. Except then you think of the damage it would cause. Unending daylight would lead to mass sleep deprivation, global anxiety, and it's not to mention what it would do to our flora, fauna, and wildlife. Crops would be ravaged, burnt, leading to a global famine. As well, unending days would lead to temperatures doubling, melting the ice caps even worse than they already are, rising sea levels and flooding coastal cities. We're not even talking about the parts of the globe that would be sent into like a long, long night. Could you imagine a 3-month-long night? For immediate starters, that would mean vampires and like cats, I guess, would be the only ones thriving. Huge for the Fang community. Interestingly though, this actually is a recognized phenomenon called a polar night. And it's a town in Norway that actually experiences something like this in Tromsø. The sun doesn't rise from November to January, and paradoxically, they don't seem to experience seasonal affective disorder at all and seem pretty fine with it. So add Norwegians alongside vampires and cats as the folks who would be fine with this. Sadly, as I am not one of those 3 groups, I probably would have an issue with it, so I'm gonna hope, just for my own sake, that this is another prediction of Baba's that isn't quite on the money.
Number 2, solar storms. With all the rather dire predictions made by Baba Vanga for the upcoming year, it could be tempting to call her a pessimist. One of her more devastating predictions for the year ahead is that we will experience what is known as a solar storm. A solar storm refers to phenomena taking place on the surface of the sun, such as coronal mass ejections or solar flares. If one of these coronal mass ejections were to reach Earth, it would cause a geomagnetic storm. This kind of storm has happened before on Earth in 1859, in what has since been called the Carrington event, due to the work of astronomer Richard Carrington. It resulted in telegraph networks being knocked out, as well as people using electronics being electrocuted, and even some pretty nasty fires. But it would be much worse if it happened today. Imagine, if you will, a world where all of the technology you take for granted was suddenly fried and unusable. Suddenly, internet access and records would be lost. Communication systems that we have come to rely on keep our world running would become useless blocks of dead machinery. A world of darkness where chaos reigns and the financial markets are suddenly put into a dramatic tailspin that we could not even begin to reverse the effects of for years. Think of the chaos that took place relatively recently in Texas when the power grid went down, and imagine what would happen if that took place all over the world. Considering the disastrous global consequences of one of these severe solar storms, let us hope that Baba Vanga is incorrect in her prediction that this will happen in the upcoming year.
I'm sick of hearing about Baba Vanga. I'd like to hear somebody else prophesizing some doomsday. Maybe Nostradamus, he's a pretty good one. Nostradamus wrote hundreds upon hundreds of predictions, and for years after the fact, scholars and experts have been trying their darndest to decipher what he meant by them, because like all the great psychics of the world out there, he only wrote in vague mysticisms. So let's hear what Mr. Michel de Nostradamus had to say. Take a listen. The moon in full of night over the high mountain. The new sage with a lone brain sees it. By his disciples invited to be immortal. Eyes to the south, hands in bosoms, bodies in the fire. Now, I'm gonna be level with you. This does kind of sound like something a wizard in a cave in like one of the Zelda games would tell you, but let me do my best to parse this. Some Nostradamus experts and translators believe that this could be a reference to the rise of the digital age. I know, but bear with me. The new sage with a lone brain sees it. By his disciples invited to be immortal could possibly be referring to, and I don't want to stroke his ego too much here by calling him a sage, stage, but Mark Zuckerberg's desire for the metaverse and his unwavering belief that that's the future of humanity, that we're all gonna strap ourselves into a VR headset and start living our new lives inside a digital realm that looks like Wii Sports Resort, where we'll all begin anew and leave our fleshy bodies behind. Perhaps this is what Bodies in the Fire is referring to. Now, this stuff all seems a little sci-fi still, but it's an interesting thing to ponder and think about as we're getting close to reality each day. Is this the end goal for humanity? To link us all up? To escape the weakness of our flesh and get plugged into the matrix, existing as bits and bytes forever? In the last few years, we've seen AI go from rudimentary chatbots to these impressive creation tools capable of generating things we wouldn't believe. Will we get to a point where an AI can mimic a human experience? Notable video game director Hideo Kojima firmly believes this, and in a December 2022 interview alluded to this, saying that he believes he'll continue making video games even after his own death because he will have scanned his brain, and an AI based off his thoughts and his works will continue on his legacy long after he's gone. A disciple invited to be immortal, and if there's any disciple, it's Hideo Kojima. Now, I don't know about you, but I kinda like this reality, and I hope we can stay in it just a little bit longer, but that's mostly because I'm bad with computers. Number 5. Realistic holograms. In the episode Holidays of Future Past, we get another glimpse into the future timeline of the Simpsons family. Bart is living in the refurbished Springfield Elementary, which is now low-income housing, meaning Bart is still under the thumb of Principal Skinner, who's now Landlord Skinner of the lofts at Springfield Elementary. A little side prediction, I absolutely think this is gonna happen. I definitely think people are gonna live in decommissioned schools. You know, we're not gonna need them anymore if we're all just downloading Wikipedia onto a USB into our consciousness. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, to pass the time, Bart is still into Itchy and Scratchy, except instead of watching it on TV, Bart watches it as a live projected hologram in front of him. Itchy and Scratchy then proceed to do exactly what they do best, which is scratch, bite, and inflict grievous bodily harm on one another, which then splatters all over the walls of Miss Krabappel's former classroom behind him. Now, hologram technology is already leaps and bounds, making incredible strides. I mean, in our lifetime, we've seen it go from science fiction to regular reality. The Tupac hologram blew our minds when we first saw it, still blows mine. We even saw Homer as a hologram actually making a surprise appearance at a Comic-Con a few years back with his father, Matt Groening. Now, the real development will be when we get holograms like shown in this episode, that you could interact with physically or could have an interaction with the environment around you, which I think is all kinds of scary. I mean, imagine if a hologram, digital light conjured, could touch you or grab you. Imagine the ramifications of that. Or don't, to be honest, because I actually don't really want to think about it. But if you do want something to think about, why not thinking about subscribing to Top 5 Scary? We got videos every single day for your viewing pleasure. Let's keep going. Number 4. Economic crash. Look, things aren't doing too great economy-wise lately. You tried to buy butter recently? A trip to the grocery store just isn't what it used to be. And maybe the Simpsons writing team knows more than they're letting on. In a recent-ish episode from the 24th season, Homer goes to prep school. Homer meets a new friend who's voiced by Tom Waits, bizarrely enough. The man overhears Homer at Moe's talking about how he doesn't think society could survive a collapse, and the man agrees with him and warns Homer that soon there'll be economic disaster, and the supermarkets will collapse, and the United States will come down with it. Homer insists that America can't fall because it's a strong empire like Rome. The man then pulls out an iPad and shows Homer an unspecified vague video with no dates that warn him of a vague impending apocalypse, which is more than enough to convince a simpleton like Homer to join their cult-like group of survivalist preppers, prepping for what they believe to be the inevitable collapse. Of course, this is a pretty real phenomenon. We all know about preppers by now. Preppers are a recognized group. There was that reality show for a while, so that's all very real. Whether or not there's an incoming collapse and the supermarkets will be empty and we'll all be raiding, who's to say? I'm not an economist, I'm a YouTube host, so all I can say is that I've noticed butter is a lot more expensive than they usually are. In the end, Homer inadvertently triggers an event that causes a collapse in Springfield, but to his and the preppers' dismay, Springfield bounces back like nothing happens. So maybe we don't need to be worried. You know, in the event of a societal shutdown, as long as we have each other and a couple people remember some good jokes from The Simpsons, I think we could survive an apocalypse together. Number 3. Cloning blues. The Simpsons heads towards the future fairly often in the modern seasons these days. I didn't know that. I guess once you've been on for 34 years, you're gonna have to start inching towards the future eventually. Now, in previous episodes set in the near future, like the classics Lisa's Wedding or Bart to the Future, they've been surprisingly bang on with their predictions. I'm sure we all know about they make a joke about President Trump embark to the future, but also some pretty smaller stuff here and there, like FaceTime being the primary method of communicating in the future. Well, the 18th episode of season 25, Days of Future Future, takes us back to the future Simpsons timeline. The episode shows us a grim fate, Homer's death. The family is devastated until Homer is swiftly cloned and replaced, memories intact. Of course, Homer being Homer, this new Homer does not last very long, and his clones have to be replaced like batteries in a smoke detector, and he ends up going through Dr. Frink's entire supply of clone bodies in a matter of days. Eventually, Homer's consciousness is given over to a robotic body, kinda a la Westworld. Now obviously this technology is pretty fantastical, and I would wager we're definitely a few years off, and at the very least before we'll see a human being stepping out of a test tube with their memories intact and ready to go face the world. But I think it's more likely coming soon than it is later. Number 2. Journey to Mars. Look, eventually we're gonna have to leave this planet behind, you know? It had a good run, can't deny that, but someday we gotta just move on, you know? It's the nature of humanity, exploring beyond the final frontier. In the 16th episode of season 27, we get a possible glimpse into this, with the episode featuring Marge and Lisa volunteering to be some of humanity's first pioneers into space, volunteering to go live on Mars. In the episode, a private company called Exploration Inc. is projecting to send people into space to colonize the third rock from the sun by the year 2026 and are looking for the first colonists. Marge learns during the training period that much of the skills they're looking for are similar to housework, one of Marge's favorite activities, leading her to become the perfect candidate, irritating Lisa, who wanted to be the first person on Mars. In the end, the two of them end up living there by 2050. Now, in the real world, going to Mars is a massive goal for the private company SpaceX, the other company that the CEO of Twitter runs. In the past, they've speculated that they would have people reaching Mars by now, but have pushed back a bit on that deadline. Their most recent estimations claim that by 2029, SpaceX will be sending out the first manned flights to the Red Planet to check it out. Will we get there by then? Honestly, I can see it happening. I think that's another one where we're inching closer with each passing day. The only question now is who will get there first, us or the Simpsons in 2026. That's the deadline we've got to meet or beat. And number 1, zombies. This one honestly came up a lot more than I think it would as I was looking for Simpsons predictions. Somebody in the writer's room has a very firm belief that this is how society is going to end. Now, it could just be because The Walking Dead has been really popular for the last 10 years and we as a people love zombies in our pop culture, but it shows up enough times in Simpsons future episodes that I thought it was worth noting. It's worth noting in 2 different episodes on this list even. You know, the ones that give us a look into the Simpsons canon, they both reference a zombie apocalypse. In the ending of Homer Goes to Prep School, after Homer sees that society would survive a collapse, at the end of the episode we see a shot of a meteor with zombies coming to Springfield. In fact, it's almost lightly implied that in the Simpsons universe there was kind of a low-grade zombie apocalypse. Because then, in the episode Days of Future Future, zombies seem to be just part of society, with Lisa working at a soup kitchen looking after the undead. Is this a glimpse into a dark future? I honestly think the way they treat zombies in The Simpsons is more or less how we deal with zombies. I don't think we'd have a full-blown Walking Dead thing. Maybe that would happen for a couple of weeks, but honestly I think we just work around it. I think you'd see zombies working minimum wage jobs. I think they'd be Uber Eats couriers or just like hanging out on the streets. I'm not afraid of seeing a shell of someone's former self shambling around as a corpse. I hope The Simpsons never ends, if nothing else, so they can always be around to predict the future.
Number 5 on this list is better than human robots. Humans are far from perfect. I think we can all agree on that. But up to this point, there hasn't been a single other species as intelligent or capable as humans have been. That's why we have effectively taken over the whole planet and have become the dominant species. We may not stay dominant for much longer if robots can become better than us though. Best Life says, a more immediate concern that will only be exacerbated in the decades to come is the phasing out of jobs and entire industries as artificial intelligence makes them obsolete. If we do not act promptly in anticipation of job disruption, we could experience a social catastrophe on a scale not seen since the Great Depression, predict Rohit Talwar, Steve Wells, and Alexandra Whittington, leaders of Fast Future, a professional foresight firm. Governments could be caught out by the pace and scale of automation through robotics and AI to such an extent that a sudden surge in unemployment leaves significant numbers of people without work and without the funds to provide for their families. They predict that such a situation population would lead to all sorts of collateral issues such as increasing social unrest, tension related to the income inequality, a rise in criminal behavior in order to meet basic needs, and potentially violent backlash against government leaders and authorities. Robots don't need to come in with futuristic weapons and kill us all to do some serious damage to humanity. Just by letting us further develop them and then implement them instead of human workers, that's gonna do enough damage. I've read extensively on this topic before, and it is literally already happening right now. People are losing their jobs left, right, and center because robots are just simply cheaper and more efficient. Sooner rather than later, there are gonna be too many people unemployed by this, and the whole thing is gonna come crashing down. We've just gotta hope that by that time, the robots aren't smart enough to take over either. Number 4 on this list is rigged elections. Now this is something that's been going on for time, but don't expect it to leave us anytime soon. Best Life says, as technology has made voting easier in some parts of the world, it's also made voting systems more vulnerable to attack, and these threats are only likely to grow, as we've seen in the efforts from Russians in the United States to most recent elections. Hacking an election in terms of changing actual votes is extremely risky for a nation state to do against the US, as it could lead to war, but for hacktivists and some organized crime groups, the risk may be worth it, says Jason Glassberg, co-founder of Casabas Security, a hacking firm that does extensive research and testing for the Internet of Things. At a minimum, expect to see ransomware and other cyber extortion targeting voting systems in the coming years. However, more dramatic attacks such as permanently crippling voting machines or forcing the machines to retabulate votes are also realistic. So it seems that rigged elections are only evolving and becoming trickier to detect, not leaving us behind like some would hope. We have this perception that our system is set in place and it's totally fair and democratic, but this just goes to show how off that perception is. So many factors that we don't know about go into an election, and our tiny little vote might not play that big of a role if some voting machine is casting millions for one candidate. It's all very slimy and sadly the reality of the world. Number 3 on this list is hijacked cities. So we don't live in Gotham and there's no evil Joker character coming to take over our town, so how would somebody hijack an entire city? Well, Best Life says, the dark side of our technological advancements is that we are also more vulnerable to attack. Glassberg points out to the recent ransomware attack on Atlanta that froze the city's systems, which eventually cost it $2.6 million for emergency response. We can expect to see more attacks like this in the coming years, particularly as city and county governments run a number of critical services which are often insecure and increasingly connected to the internet, says Glassberg. Since it's proven difficult to stop and prosecute these attacks, especially when they use simple tactics like ransomware, this is a very realistic scenario in the coming years as more criminal groups will hijack public services in order to demand large ransoms. Having all our cities run through tech has made our cities very advanced, but it's also made them very exploitable. The Atlanta example proves that some guy with a supercomputer across the world could completely bring the city to its knees. The government has even included this idea in warfare and has full-on task forces designed to target tech and things of this nature. Expect a lot more attacks like this moving forward as our tech continues to develop. Number 2 on this list is digital Big Brother. I am a big fan of the show Big Brother, one of my favorite reality TV shows actually. Would I love to participate on that show? Absolutely I would. Do I want to be monitored every second of my life though? Absolutely not. Best Life says, as AI becomes increasingly sophisticated, we will inevitably start to see applications in the security domain developed without further programming by humans, according to the Fast Future team. Whilst not quite to the level of Skynet at the heart of the Terminator movie franchise, the machines promise to be far more sophisticated in their approach than humans and to develop more complex algorithms they predict. Consequently, such developments will severely challenge our ability to understand, monitor, intervene, make changes, and exert control over our digital security bots. They expect that the surveillance and control these bots will have over our lives could increasingly infringe on our freedoms, giving a sense that robot overlords are watching us. I already feel like a robot overlord is watching me. Like anytime I say something that rhymes with Alexa and then my Alexa robot turns on, I realize that I'm being listened to all the time. Or when I mention one thing in passing to a friend, like, I don't know, I say that I really want to go golfing sometime soon, And then the next thing that I see on my Instagram account is ads for golfing. This Big Brother mentality is already happening right now, and it really isn't nice. Apparently, this is only going to become more and more invasive as time goes on. We won't be able to go to the bathroom anymore without some robot knowing about it and storing that information somewhere. And finally, number 1 on this list is extinct species. This one is truly very sad, and it's something that has been going on for decades. Global warming is a disaster. It is a man-caused disaster that is slowly eating the world, and it's gaining speed. The ice caps are melting at unprecedented rates, and before we know it, they will be completely destroyed. Not only will that destroy the habitats of tons of creatures that live by the ice, but it will also destroy the habitats of creatures in the ocean and destroy our cities because the ocean level will rise enough to flood them. The next 50 years is absolutely critical when it comes to climate change, and many experts think that we've already passed the place of no return. It's currently estimated that 1 million species will go extinct by 2050, and there literally isn't anything that we can do about it at this point. Reversing the effects of climate change takes time, and what we do now, we will see those results in 50 years. That number of 1 million species will only continue to rise and rise if change isn't actively enforced. And honestly guys, we might be part of that 1 million species. Number 5 on this list is war. So this one's pretty general, but the Bible definitely touched on it quite a bit, so it feels fair to include it. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even until death." Whew! What a mouthful, guys, but that is just one passage discussing war, but frankly, there are just so many of them. Sometimes they talk about specific wars being fought between certain groups, but a lot of the time it's just war in general. Sometimes it even discusses how God will be with you when you go to war, which is actually kind of an incentive to fight. This book and what it preaches has been the catalyst for so many battles in human history, and it's not unreasonable to think that it's going to happen again. I certainly hope that there is no more major wars in human history, and this predict isn't right, but I'm not going to be holding my breath. Number 4 on this list is the 7 bowls. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, "Go and pour out onto earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God." So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "Just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments." That's a passage from the Bible, and those are only 3 of the bowls. There are literally 4 more of these things that get even worse. The 4th one causes the sun to burn people. The 5th one covers the world in darkness and has people bite their tongues off. The 6th one dries up a massive river, and the 7th one causes huge earthquakes. So not really the best of times if you ask me. Now let's be real folks, are all of these things gonna happen all at once? Probably not. But some of it definitely could. Is there a reality where I see all of the fish in the oceans getting poisoned by something and then ultimately destroying the worldwide ecosystem? Potentially. Could I see a massive earthquake ravaging parts of the world and causing a horrible chain reaction killing millions? Yeah, I mean, it could happen. All of these bowls are pretty horrible, and we just have to hope that none of these things happen to us now, because the ramifications, they'd be pretty catastrophic. Number 3 on this list is the persecution of Christians. Religion, although it can do great good, has also caused horrible evil. Throughout history, we can see that religion is basically the leading cause for humans to start fighting each other. What someone believes and the rules to which they govern their life is really important to us humans, and Christianity is is no different. The Bible has talked a bunch about the persecution of Christians before. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed but not driven to despair, persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. That's just one of the passages in the Bible talking about it, but we also have some other ones that are just straight to the point, reading, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." Now, Christians being persecuted is nothing new. This is a prediction that's actually already come to fruition many times over. Like I said before, religion has started many wars in the past, and the persecution of Christians has certainly been a reason for a couple of them. It's possible that this isn't actually done though. I'd like to believe that the world is getting to a place where one can believe what they choose to believe, and that's fine for them, but the fact of the matter is we just simply aren't there yet. There has always been and continues to be the persecution of not just Christians, but tons of groups with all different beliefs. It's sad to say, but this might not be over yet, and this prediction may continue to be proven correct. Number 2 on this list is famine. For probably most of the people watching this video, famine, or the thought of going hungry, most likely isn't that close to you. However, there are still millions of people in the world that suffer greatly from famine and die from it all the time. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famine and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. Famine is mentioned a lot in the Bible, and I think it was probably a sign of the times. We have to remember that when the Bible was written, the world was not nearly as advanced as it is today. Food and water, basic resources for survival, were not a given by any means, but something that people had to fight for on the daily. If you had these resources in abundance, then that was considered a luxury and you were probably really wealthy. Even though we don't live in those times anymore, and now for a lot of people, water is at your nearest tap and food at your nearest supermarket, famine is still a real thing. It should also be noted that we should never take food for granted. Some experts are predicting that if global warming continues at the drastic rate that it's going, food will become far harder to grow and get a lot scarcer. Fingers crossed we can prevent this from happening and keep everybody well fed in the future. And finally, number 1 on this list is an asteroid. Listen to this passage from the Bible and tell me this isn't just a tad bit concerning. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So I don't know about you guys, but the prospect of getting hit with 3 separate asteroids really doesn't sound like a great time to me. The way that they describe it may be a bit tame too, to be honest. If we're gonna get hit with 3 separate things from space, then it's very likely that more than a third of the trees are gonna burn up. In fact, it would probably be the end of the world as we know it. I've done a lot of research on the possibility of an asteroid coming and crashing into the Earth, and it's a real concern. Luckily, scientists don't predict anything in the near future, but that doesn't mean that it still won't happen. In fact, statistically speaking, eventually it will happen. Whether we're ready for this impact or are capable of defending ourselves from it, that's another question entirely. Number 5 on this list is the continued damaging effects of climate change. That's right guys, we're going there. In 2021, temperatures in North America had some record-setting numbers. Over the last few years, temperatures have been rising significantly, and 2021 was no different. The west coast of Canada and the United States were the hottest that they've ever been this past year in 2021, and we saw what rising temperatures can cause. Forest fires raged in British Columbia and in California, and with the temperatures continuing to rise, this will only get worse and worse. Something concerning as well is that the nighttime temperature was hotter than it's ever been. Typically, it's very hot in the day and then gets pretty cool in the nighttime. This allows our bodies to cool off when we sleep. However, in 2021, the temperature during the night didn't drop nearly as drastically as it usually does, and this is because the Earth is holding on to that heat in the atmosphere and it's having a hard time escaping. With all of this being said, and the fact that no real dramatic change has been made to our greenhouse gas emissions, scientists predict that this trend will continue in 2022. They've come out and said that between 2021 and 2025, there is a 90% chance that we will have the warmest global year ever. They also predict that there is a 40% chance that in that same time frame, we will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than what our global temperature was at pre-industrial days. All of this heat also means that they're predicting a lot more tropical storms as well. The frequency of cyclones in the Atlantic area is supposed to rise. Forest fires, as I mentioned earlier, will continue to rage and be harder to suppress, and southwestern North America is likely to be a lot drier than it's ever been. Basically, scientists believe that 2022 will continue to break climate change records and be pretty detrimental to the Earth. Number 4 on this list is a prediction from Baba Vanga. This one is pretty bloody triggering, and I can only hope that she's wrong about it. Baba Vanga thinks that in 2022 there will be a deadly virus that is released from a glacier and that will ravage the world. Now, if you don't know who Baba Vanga is, then she was a woman who lost her eyes at a very young age, but then developed the ability to have visions. She's also made a lot of correct predictions over the years, with people saying that she has an 85% success rate. Brexit, the Syrian gas attacks, the first United States black president, all of this stuff was predicted by Baba Vanga. In 2022, she is saying that a glacier will melt due to global warming, and that in that ice will be a virus that will get released into the world, and our human immune systems won't be ready for it. After I cannot handle any more viruses or diseases or anything like that at all. The sad thing is though, that this could very well actually happen. We already spoke about global warming and how it is continuing to rise, with 2022 having the potential to be the hottest year ever. This is obviously causing the glaciers on the poles to melt. Now, the whole aspect of having a virus released because of this kind of sounds like it was taken straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's actually accurate. Scientists have found viruses in the ice before, and after testing them, have realized that they are nothing like what we've ever seen. Therefore, our bodies would not be capable of fending off these viruses because they have never encountered anything that's similar to them. Some of these viruses may not even affect humans either, but they could affect animals or plants. This could be just as detrimental though, as it has the potential to absolutely annihilate the ecosystem. Either way, guys, we just have to cross our fingers and hope that any viruses found in the ice aren't too dangerous, and we just dodge this bullet altogether. Number 3 on this list is another catastrophic economic recession. Yep, guys, it's time to talk money, or well, I guess in this instance it would be the lack of money. After the massive economic recession that took place a little over a decade ago, everyone is still on high alert, doing their best to make certain that we don't fall into that trap ever again. This is easier said than done though, because there are often extenuating circumstances that are out of our control. For instance, COVID, that really hurt the economy and nobody saw that coming. Stuff like that is kind of impossible to predict. However, that doesn't stop people from trying to look ahead and see what the next economic year will hold for us. Right now, a positive economic recovery is seen as very likely due to many people believing that 2022 is supposed to be the first normal year back after the pandemic. People will have savings that they want to spend, they go out, they spend them, bang, the economy loves it. But experts believe that this level of economic optimism has reached an unstable place. The stock market is predicting such a big boom, and the experts don't think that the money will actually hold up to what they're predicting. It should also be noted that the percentage chance of an economic recession has been slowly rising over the last few months. Right now, it's believed that in July of next year, there will be just under a 10% chance that the entire United States economy goes into a major recession. A 1 in 10 chance, it's not horrible, but when you're playing with people's life savings and their jobs, that gets a lot scarier very quickly. Economic optimism can be a good thing, but overconfidence can bring us to a very scary place, as seen by the housing market collapse of 2007. Number 2 on this list is a prediction by Nostradamus. Now, would this really be a 2022 predictions list video if we didn't have Nostradamus in it? He's basically a staple whenever it comes to scary predictions. This time, he believes that a major climate war will start in 2022. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nostradamus, he was a French astrologer and seer in the 1500s. Now, we still talk about him today though, due to his major work called the Prophecies. The Prophecies is a collection of poetic quatrains that predict things to come in the world. Nostradamus has been proved correct with some of his prophecies, such as the death of Henry II, the Great Fire of London, and the French Revolution. We actually talked a little bit about Nostradamus in a previous video looking at the top 5 mysterious people who tried to warn us about the apocalypse. In 2021, Nostradamus believed that zombies would take over the world. Pretty outlandish if you ask me, but the one that we're talking about today is a little bit more reasonable in my opinion. Nostradamus says, under the opposite Babylonian climate, great will be without the outpouring. As we've already spoken about, climate change will be greatly affecting our world. Could it be possible that a country has a shortage of resources due to this climate change and has to go to war? Potentially a lack of clean drinking water could cause some type of chaos between two nations? Maybe the world enacts new climate change laws that one country refuses to follow and therefore goes to war with some other nations. I'm not sure what it's gonna be, but all of these things, they could have potential. The one thing about Nostradamus is that he was never very specific with his predictions and often left it up for interpretation. But I do think that a war involving something climate based is certainly a possibility and would be particularly horrible because war could only ever hurt the climate even more. Number 1 on this list is another prediction from Baba Vanga about a dragon taking over the world. That's right folks, clearly Baba Vanga was a very busy lady while she was alive and had multiple predictions for the year 2022. In this one, she believes that a dragon will take over the entire planet. In fact, she is quoted as saying, "A strong dragon will seize humanity. The 3 giants will unite. Some people will have red money. I see numbers 100, 5, and many zeros." So we have a lot going on here. We have dragons, giants, money that is red, and some strange numbers that kinda came out of nowhere. If we take what Baba Vanga said literally, then I can almost guarantee you that it won't come true. In my entire living life, I have never seen a dragon before, and as much as I would love to believe that they're real, I think it's safe to say that one is not going to appear next year and ravage the planet. That being said though, if we break down what she said a little bit more, then there could be some serious truth in what she's saying. Specialists of Baba Vanga believe that when she is referring to a dragon, she's actually talking about China. The giants that she's referring to, interpreters believe are the 3 biggest countries in Asia: China, Russia, and India. Therefore, they will unite as a force, and the dragon, China, will take over the world. The money being read could be in reference to yuan, and the denominations of 100 or 5 could be referring to some important monetary number of those yuan that hasn't been made clear to us at this point. Now, if we take her meaning as I just described it, it actually doesn't sound nearly as outlandish as it did when we were talking about dragons. However, this would be pretty freaking bad because I can only imagine that the giants uniting and the dragon taking over the world would mean a massive all-out war. If China, India, and Russia are involved, that also means that the use of nuclear weapons would probably take place, in which case 2022, it's really gonna be a lousy year, guys.